Okay.
And welcome back to the show. The fabulous independent educated radicals for community empowerment, better known by the acronym FIERCE, is an organization that's building the leadership and power of the LGBTQ youth of color in New York City. And the organization aims to further build the leadership, political consciousness, as well as organizing skills of LGBTQ youth. Now, in New York City, FIERCE organizes campaigns to fight harassment, as well as violence, and increase access to safe public space for LGBTQ youth. And joining us here to help provide some insight is the executive director of FIERCE, which is known as the fabulous independent educated radicals for community empowerment, Mustafa Sullivan. And Mustafa, good to have you.
Nice to have you too. Thank you for having this moment.
Yeah, I try to get the acronym FIERCE in there to make sure I got it all together there, but thank you so much.
There's a lot of members who forget also, it's deep. It means a lot.
So talk to us a little bit about exactly what does FIERCE mean?
Well, FIERCE, ironically, is a youth organizing group that I worked with and became a member with 20 years ago when it started. Originally, the organization started to fight against police violence and gentrification in the West Village. At the time, in 2000, this is when the city first decided to gentrify the West Village, and the West Side Pier was on the chopping block. If you look at the West Side Pier now, it's a nice little park, but at the time, it was a haven for like young LGBTQ folks like myself coming up in New York who needed a place to be, who needed to meet community, and who met some of the people to this day who continue to house young, homeless, queer, trans, and gender nonconforming young people, not just providing them a shelter, but also providing them the opportunity to organize. And now the work that we do in the Bronx is particularly around ending youth homelessness, being in solidarity with communities of color, including the parents and families who've lost lost people to police violence, mm-hmm. and ending not just the police system, but abolishing prisons and making sure that we don't have cops in our schools. And also, in addition, that homophobia and transphobia is not happening in our schools or in our neighborhoods.
And when we talk about, in the neighborhoods, obviously a lot does still continue to be out there. We talk about racism that still exists, but homophobia is still real as well. I know that you're doing a great job in terms of educating people. How do we go about bridging the gap when we talk about that?
Well, I think the first thing is that we need to trust the Black, radical, queer folks, community organizers, leaders, community folks who are already in our neighborhoods, right? I'm from Brooklyn originally, but I've been in the Bronx for 20 years. And often, my word isn't trusted, right? There's different organizations, I live in the Fordham area, there's different organizations that benefit off of talking about Black Lives Matter, for example, but don't support me directly. Forget about not knowing the history that Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson put down in terms of fighting against police violence, forgetting about the history of many of us, including myself, who've always put myself on the line for Black community and all over the city. And so I think, one of the first things that we have to start, you don't have to look far. There's many of us in communities who are fighting, against evictions, fighting for more equal rights for all people. And we also know that we will not be erased from history or organizations that choose to use us, use the quality of our work, which has literally happened to me directly, and it's happened to FIERCE as an organization. And we need to start telling more of that truth, including, I know, for example, Richie Torres. I know Richie Torres very well. And, though he does some work, I guess, to support homophobia, he doesn't support organizers at Marsha's House. He doesn't support FIERCE fighting against police violence. And he directly works with police. We know this because the families that I work with directly, who lost many people, Iris Baez, all the different folks who lost people, know that Richie Torres in particular does not support our community organizing work. But yet we're talking about, now we've defeated a homophobic pastor. We have to get off of that kind of stuff. We have to really work much harder to tell the honest truth about our leadership, whether they be Black LGBTQ folks or white capitalist folks in our communities.
Let me ask this question about the LGBTQ community when it comes to social justice. Do you feel as though the voice is being recognized and respected?
No, I mean, like, again, you know, one of the reasons why Richie Tour is one is many LGBTQ folks in this city, some of them who are white, supported his campaign, not talking to me, stepping over me to talk to someone who's supposedly supposed to represent this district, who, by the way, just to be clear, I've known since before they ran, since they ran their first election for city council. You know, that I think is one of the pervasive problems, is that you have folks like myself or young people or anybody who doesn't agree with just voting or doesn't just follow the party line or whatever progressives have put out there or whatever. When we don't support that and we speak truth, they ignore us. They act like we don't know what we're talking about. They pretend they never met us and never spoke to us. They do a lot of the things at the mirror, right? I see the police violence. I didn't see it on TV. I wasn't aware that there was an LGBTQ organization in the Bronx, for example. I've been here for 4 years. I've been in this particular movement for 20 years in my whole life. Whether it be the LGBTQ movement, when I came out in 1990 something, I'm not gonna go into all of that, but I've been here, I've been present in many movements, and I've seen how Black folks are repeatedly erased and stolen from or used as props.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it all.
Well, let me ask this then. When you talk about not being respected, the other question comes to the issue of discrimination. I mean, and when we talk about LGBTQ discrimination, there's also discrimination you feel like in the healthcare field, particularly when it comes to those of transgender gender.
Yes, trans women, trans people of color, trans men often are not only misgendered in the healthcare system, but also forgotten, erased from LGBTQ history. You know, right now, for example, luckily, through the organizing of many organizers throughout the city, not only are we going to have a Reclaim Pride March, but we're also going to have a party hosted by STAR, hosted by Fierce, hosted by Reclaim Pride and several organizations on the pier. Normally, if you remember, we have corporate pride, where police have rainbow LGBTQ folks, and a lot of organizations pretend to be down with Black LGBTQ folks, but they only call us during this time, during this month. This is pervasive. It's in the LGBTQ community directly. It's a result of all of the way that gay marriage erased the fights that we have fought. And this is one of the reasons why not only am I a proud supporter of Black Lives Matter as an idea and concept, but I know the people directly in multiple cities who do this work. And I see that Fierce is not just a part of a movement that some people joined recently, it's a part of a legacy, a long legacy of Black, queer, radical folks who are trans, who are gender nonconforming, who are Black, brown, Afro-Latino, all of that, fighting many fights, enemies on all sides. And it's really sad, and it continues.
So where do you see things going from here? Because obviously we're seeing a lot of acquiescing from parties when it comes to dealing with racial issues and now more affirming of the African-American community. When we talk about LGBTQ, of course, June being Pride Month, and it being more than just a month, I'm sure that you're looking for a different kind of affirmation. So if you had to say what it is that you really would want in this time, in this season, from people, what would that be?
I would say commit to fighting for transitional housing for all people, including homeless folks. I would say trust the young people when they say not only do they not want police in their schools, but they don't want police in our neighborhoods. Many of the folks who were protesting, and I know because I worked with them, I was on the ground with them, they were young. They were very young. And so they have an analysis that needs to be listened to, but it's also not confused by, all these stories about looting, or even just quite frankly, just being real, we just got into a whole internet argument around fireworks, right? And I know it's bothering a lot of people justifiably, but also now we could see the mayor once again using the angst in our community to put police on our streets, the illegal fire. Still need the mayor to defund the police, but yet now we need the mayor to step in to help with fireworks. This is violence, y'all. And we have to, I think, in direct answer to your question, we have to focus on structural violence. And within our communities, we have to lift off the leadership that's authentic, that's actually doing direct work, and not be confused by either white saviors or Black folks who are capitalists and only looking for their own personal advancement over the collective.
Let me ask the question about this. Why do you think it's so hard for people to accept the LGBTQ community?
It's about internalized oppression, as far as I'm concerned. It's about a belief that comes from capitalism that only men or hetero relationships are valid. It's about people, like just being real. Many of the folks in our community just put young people out on the streets when they don't agree, when they think, their Jesus told them to not accept queer folks, to not accept gay folks, to tell young people to go. And let's be clear, it's not just a thing that happens in the South or in rural cities. It happens in the city too. There are plenty of young people that I work with that their parents put them out to, right? And so we have to talk about that type of internal violence, and that comes from individual oppression, right? That comes from the internalized oppression that makes us feel like people can't be different. Black folks only have to be this way. They only have to be in hetero relationships. Or on the flip side, in LGBTQ conversations, they only want to speak to nice, peaceful LGBTQ folks. Stonewall was a riot. I'm not confused about that. The civil rights movement was not just about MLK, no matter how many people want to quote and live by nonviolent direct action. That's not real history. Learn the history. If you're serious about movement, about the advancement of Black folks, LGBTQ folks, immigrant folks, look underneath the story that's presented to you. Look underneath how people who say they're working in a community, what they're really doing. Look underneath all the stories, and even my own story. Look at me. I have a real record. Look at Fierce. It has a real record. And have real conversations about the reality, the real material reality of what people are actually doing to change this community. Like, for example, just being real, we do multiple things, including participate in legislation. Even if we know we want to abolish the police, we know where the city is, and we make a realistic assessment of where we can be to move the city forward. And we will continue to move the city forward as an organization, and as movement leaders. My staff is made up of movement leaders who are young, who are from this city and all over this country. We're serious about fighting for homeless young people and ending police violence in a way that gets them out of our communities. And we will do it over time, and we will make sure that people in our community really honor that. And we'll talk to folks. I meet with people in churches. My youth go to people in churches, meet with folks all over. It's not like because we're LGBTQ, we don't talk to quote unquote straight Black folks, regular Black folks. Like, we're in the community directly. And our voices need to be really heard, not sidetracked, erased. A lot of folks like to take the edges off, right? Oh, I want to support what Mustafa said, but I don't like this part, so let me just cut around it. I don't like what that trans woman did. Layleen died.
But let me...
And the Bronx DA, Layleen Polanco, died. Yes. I just want to say this real quick.
Oh, yeah.
The Bronx DA is also complicit in this violence, right? Layleen Polanco died in Rikers Island. And the Bronx DA decided that whatever happened, which we know was torture inside the prison by police, in solitary confinement, that happened in the Bronx DA decided that there was no criminal acts. That was the Bronx that decided that, the Bronx DA.
Well, look, I just want to jump in before we get down to the end here and ask you about this, because looking at that case and looking at other cases right there, when it comes to the LGBTQ community, political pressure has always been a thing that has occurred through the LGBTQ community. do you feel as though, because you have critics on the other side who say, listen, LGBTQ has a huge voice in terms of you got legislation passed, things have happened. So there is, from a certain perspective, would you agree, a lot of political backing through this community?
Right? They skip over us because it's like, it's a comfortably nice narrative, right? Nice story. Richie Torres defeats Ruben Diaz Sr. Nice story. But the reality is that story is on the backs of the deaths of Black people in this city. The deaths and the disregard of mothers, daughters, families, who not only have faced police violence, not only have faced homelessness, not only Black straight people, but also queer and trans people. And yet Richie Torres disregarded all of us. But yet the LGBTQ folks in Manhattan, or the folks in this city, or the folks in the Bronx with privilege can decide over all of that Richie Torres is a great choice. There were many choices, including Samelis Lopez, that actually works in the community. But because the LGBTQ community, the white folks in particular, wanted to support Richie Torres, that was a better story. Didn't ask me, by the way. Again, been here 20 damn years. I even got an award from some of these folks. But yet to ask me about politics in the Bronx, in my own district, nah. Let's just go with the safe choice. Biden, by the way, we know is the safe choice. Same thing, but now it's happening in the Bronx. Same message. Just get with the Democrats. Everything gonna be A-okay. The Black more Democrats.
Mm-hmm. That's another conversation. Got to bring you back to talking about, Democrat, Republican, LGBTQ community. Definitely want to have that conversation. But Mustafa, thank you so much for sharing with us. Mustafa Sullivan, talking about Fierce. Before we go, if people want to get connected to Fierce, how do they do that?
I would look to our Instagram and our Facebook, where our website is still under construction. It's old and we're having issues technologically. But please look at our Instagram and Facebook. We have all of our events. If you want to meet some of us, like I said, Sunday, we'll be out on the pier and also in the Reclaim Pride March. And we also will be at an action this Thursday with the Justice Committee and the families of folks who've been killed by police violence. And folks all over will be doing the action at City Hall on Thursday. So if you want to see us in person, we'll be there. And I'll be talking.
Okay. Mustafa Sullivan, our guest here on the show, and I want to thank you.
Thank you.